Luna never expected to sit across a dinner table and receive a bill for her own childhood. She was 29 years old, living in Seattle, Washington, building a life she had worked incredibly hard for. Good job, small savings, a sense of finally getting somewhere. And then one Sunday evening, her parents sat her down with printed paperwork, a pen, and a number that made her vision blur. $5,000 every month. For raising her, they called it gratitude. They called it her responsibility. They had a whole speech prepared, how much they had sacrificed, how much she owed them, how this was just what good children did. Luna sat there feeling the floor tilt beneath her. But then her brother Caleb walked through that door. Caleb, the quiet one, the one nobody ever worried about, the one who had spent the last 6 years working as a licensed attorney in family law, and everything changed in about 4 minutes flat. What happened in that room didn't just stop Luna from writing that check. It started something her parents never saw coming and couldn't stop once it began. Luna almost signed that paper. She was seconds away from agreeing to $5,000 a month out of pure guilt. Then Caleb walked in, and what he found when he started digging had nothing to do with that invoice. Hit subscribe right now, because this story goes deeper than you think. Don't miss what Caleb uncovered. My name is Luna. I'm 29 years old and I live in Seattle, Washington. I'm not someone who does things halfway, never have been. I worked through college on partial scholarship and 2 part-time jobs. Moved to Seattle at 23 with one suitcase and a plan I had written on a notepad. I built my career slowly, carefully, one step at a time. Small apartment, modest savings, a life that finally felt stable underneath my feet. I wasn't rich, but I was steady. And for someone who grew up being told she needed to be more, do more, achieve more, steady felt like everything. It felt like enough until it wasn't. My parents were not cruel people. I want to be clear about that. They fed me, clothed me, kept the lights on, but love in our house always came with an undercurrent, a measurement. Good grades were expected, not celebrated. Achievements were acknowledged briefly, then immediately followed by what's next. I grew up feeling like I was always one step behind some invisible standard they never fully defined. Caleb, my older brother, seemed to navigate it better than I did. Or maybe he just learned earlier than me not to look for warmth in places it wasn't going to come from. I kept looking. For years I kept looking. That was always my vulnerability with them. 8 months ago I got promoted. Real promotion, new title, new responsibilities, and a salary jump that finally made me feel like all those early mornings and late nights had actually meant something. I called my parents the same day. Mom cried a little. Dad said he always knew I had it in me. It was one of the warmest conversations we'd had in years, and I held on to it. What I didn't notice at that moment, what I was too happy to see, was the shift in how they looked at me after that call. Not pride exactly. Something more like recalculation. Like a number had just changed on a spreadsheet they had been quietly keeping for a very long time. It began about a month after the promotion. Mom called asking if I could help cover a car repair. Just this once, she said. Of course I helped. Then Dad mentioned a medical bill that insurance hadn't fully covered. I sent money without hesitation. Then it was a utility bill during a rough month. Then groceries when things were tight. Each request came wrapped in just enough context to feel reasonable, just enough vulnerability to make saying no feel heartless. I told myself this was what family did, that I was in a position to help and so I should. I didn't track the amounts, didn't keep records. I just kept saying yes because I loved them and because saying no felt like failing some unspoken test. By month 4 the requests had become almost monthly. The amounts had quietly grown. What started as a few $100s here and there had become requests regularly sitting between $800 and $1,200. I was still saying yes, but I had started moving things around in my own budget to make it work. Skipping things I had planned for myself, pushing back a trip I had saved for, telling myself it was temporary. Those things would stabilize, that they would get back on their feet and the tasks would stop. Looking back now I can see so clearly what I couldn't see then. The tasks were never going to stop. Because the tasks were never really about need. The call came on a Wednesday evening. Mom, casual and warm, invited me to Sunday dinner. Nothing unusual about that on the surface. We did Sunday dinners occasionally. But something in her voice sat differently. Too light. The kind of light that people perform when they're working to seem relaxed about something they aren't relaxed about at all. I asked if everything was okay. She said of course she just missed me. I said I'd be there. Spent the rest of the week unable to fully shake the feeling that something was coming. I mentioned it to Caleb in a text. He said I was probably overthinking it. We were both wrong about that. Very wrong. I arrived at my parents' house that Sunday at 6. The table was set nicely. The food smelled good. Everything looked warm and normal from the doorway. But the moment I sat down I saw it. A small stack of papers sitting to the right of my place setting. Face down, neat edges like something official waiting to be turned over. My mother smiled and my father folded his hands on the table, and something in their posture, rehearsed, settled, prepared, told me this dinner had never been about the food. Mom reached over and turned the papers face up, slid them toward me. I looked down at the top page and read the first line, and my entire body went still. $5,000 every month. That was the number sitting at the top of that page in a clean printed font like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. Below it was a title, monthly gratitude contribution, and below that a breakdown. Their mortgage assistance, utilities, food costs averaged over my childhood years, private school tuition from elementary through high school, medical expenses, clothing, extracurriculars. Everything itemized, calculated, and totaled into one monthly figure they expected me to begin paying immediately. I read it twice. Then I looked up at my parents. They were watching me with the expression of people who had rehearsed this moment many times and were finally ready to deliver it. My father leaned forward and walked me through the document like he was presenting a business proposal. He had done the math carefully. He was proud of that, I could tell. Private school alone was listed at nearly $40,000 over 8 years. Medical costs stretched across 2 pages. There were line items for school supplies, sports equipment, birthday celebrations, family vacations. Everything I had experienced as simply childhood had been assigned a dollar value and handed back to me as a debt. My mother sat quietly nodding as he spoke, occasionally adding something soft like, "We just want you to understand what went into raising you." Like understanding the invoice would make me grateful for receiving it. When my father finished presenting the breakdown, my mother took over. Her voice was gentle, almost tender, which somehow made it worse. She said that in many cultures, children financially support their parents. She said they weren't asking for anything unreasonable. She said 5,000 a month was actually quite modest given everything they had invested in me. She used the word investment twice. She talked about sacrifice, their sacrifices, their choices, their years of putting me first. And then she slid the pen across the table toward me, just like that. Pen on the table, document in front of me. Both of them are watching, like the next move was obvious, like I was simply expected to sign. I tried to respond. I said this didn't feel right. Mom immediately said feeling uncomfortable didn't make something wrong. I said 5,000 a month was more than my rent. Dad said maybe I needed to adjust my priorities. I said I had been helping them financially for months already. Mom said that was different, that was kindness, this was obligation. I said I didn't remember agreeing to any of this. Dad's voice got quieter and harder and he said, "You didn't need to agree, we raised you. That agreement was made the day you were born." I felt something in my chest tighten completely. The guilt they were counting on was working. I could feel it pulling at me like something with weight. I'm not ashamed to admit it, I was close. The guilt they had spent decades carefully building in me was doing exactly what it was designed to do. I was sitting there doing the math in my head, what I could cut, what I could defer, how tight things would get. Part of me was actually calculating how to make it work because some deep conditioned part of me still believed that if my parents said I owed them something then I probably did. My hand was actually moving toward that pen, slowly, almost without my permission. And then the front door opened, and Caleb walked in carrying his work bag, still in his work clothes, completely unaware of what he had just walked into. Caleb stopped in the doorway. "Look at me." I looked at my parents. I looked at the papers on the table and the pen sitting beside my hand. He didn't say anything at first, just set his bag down slowly on the floor by the door. My mother said his name in a tone that was trying to be welcoming but landed as warning. Caleb walked to the table, picked up the document, and started reading. My father said something about this being a private conversation. Caleb kept reading. Page 1, page 2, the breakdown pages, all of it. His face stayed completely neutral the whole time. When he finished, he set it down carefully, looked at my parents, and asked one question. Caleb's question was simple, calm, almost conversational. He said, "Did either of you claim Luna as a dependent on your taxes during the years listed in this document?" My parents looked at each other, just for a second, but that second was enough. My father said that was irrelevant. Caleb said it was actually very relevant. My mother started to say something about this not being a legal matter. Caleb opened his work bag, pulled out a legal pad, set it on the table beside their document, and said, "It is now." The room went completely quiet. My father's jaw tightened. My mother's hand stilled in her lap, and I finally moved my hand away from that pen. Caleb drove me home that night. We didn't talk much in the car, he was thinking, I could tell. That focused quiet he gets when something has his full attention. When we pulled up outside my apartment, he turned to me and said very clearly, "Do not respond to them. No calls, no texts, no explanations. If they contact you, you say nothing beyond speak to Caleb." He said he needed a few days to look at some things. I asked what things. He said he wasn't sure yet, but that document had raised questions that went beyond the invoice itself. I trusted him completely. Went inside, sat on my couch in the dark for a long time, and waited. Caleb called me 2 days later. First thing he confirmed, the demand had absolutely no legal enforceability. Parents have no legal right to invoice adult children for the cost of raising them. Childhood expenses are a parental obligation, not a recoverable debt. The document they had presented, regardless of how official it looked, was worth nothing in any court. I exhaled when he said that. But then he said, "Luna," I kept digging, and I found something that has nothing to do with that invoice. His voice had shifted, still calm but carrying something heavier underneath it. I sat up straighter on my couch, asked him what he found. He took a breath before answering. Caleb had started making calls. Quietly, carefully, reaching out to our aunt in Portland, our cousin Reese, our uncle who lived outside Spokane. What he found when he started asking careful questions was a pattern that had apparently been running for years. Our parents had borrowed money from almost every branch of the family. Small amounts from some, larger amounts from others. Always with explanations that sounded reasonable. Always with promises to repay that never materialized. Nobody had said anything because nobody knew everyone else had been asked. They had kept each request isolated. Each family member thought they were the only one. It was methodical in a way that made my stomach hurt. Caleb's voice was steady when he told me, but I could hear what was underneath it. He had been looking into their financial activity and found a personal loan opened 14 months ago. The loan was for $11,000. The name on the application was mine. My full legal name, my date of birth, my social security number, my Seattle address. I had never applied for any loan. I had never given my parents permission to use my information. I had never seen a single document, never received a single statement. $11,000 borrowed in my name, and every payment, or lack of payment, had been quietly affecting my credit for over a year. I felt cold all the way through. I pulled my credit report that same night. Caleb walked me through it over the phone while I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open. It took us about 4 minutes to find it. One account I didn't recognize, a personal loan from a lender I had never heard of. Opened 14 months ago. Several missed payments flagged. The account status listed as delinquent. My credit score had dropped significantly and I hadn't known why. I had assumed it was something I had done wrong, some oversight on my part. I had been quietly carrying the weight of it without understanding where it came from. Sitting there looking at that screen, I felt something move through me that was colder than anger. Much colder. Caleb had already reached out to a colleague, a woman named Andrea who specialized in financial fraud and identity theft cases. She reviewed everything Caleb sent her within 24 hours. Her assessment was direct. The loan application bore all the hallmarks of familiar fraud identity theft carried out by someone with close personal access to the victim's information. Social security number, date of birth, address, details that strangers don't have but family members do. She said cases like this were more common than most people realized and significantly more serious than most families wanted to acknowledge. She used the word prosecutable without hesitation. Caleb texted me after the call. 3 words, "Luna, this is big." Caleb came over that Saturday morning, brought coffee and his laptop, and we sat at my kitchen table and laid everything out together. The invoice, the family borrowing pattern, the fraudulent loan, the delinquent account, the credit damage. Piece by piece, we put it all in front of us and looked at it clearly. What had looked like a painful, overreaching demand at a Sunday dinner was actually the surface of something that had been running underneath for a long time. They hadn't just asked me for $5,000 a month. They had already been talking to me without asking, without telling me, without any intention of stopping. Caleb closed his laptop and looked at me. "What do you want to do?" I already knew. Caleb spent that weekend writing. Not a letter full of emotion or family grievance. A precise, structured legal response to everything we had uncovered. He addressed the invoice first, citing specific legal precedent establishing that parental expenses are obligations, not recoverable debts. Then he addressed the fraudulent loan, referencing the account number, the opening date, the delinquency record, and Andrea's preliminary assessment. Then the pattern of borrowing across the family, documented with dates and amounts gathered from our relatives. 3 separate issues, 3 separate sections, each one calm, factual, and completely impossible to dismiss. He read it to me over the phone before sending it. When he finished, I sat quietly for a moment. Then I said, "Send it." Monday morning, I walked into my bank with everything organized in a folder Caleb had helped me prepare. Account statements. The credit report printout with the fraudulent loan highlighted. Andrea's written preliminary assessment. A timeline Caleb had constructed showing when the loan was opened relative to my parents' access to my personal documents. The fraud specialist at my bank was thorough and took everything seriously. She flagged the account immediately, opened a formal investigation, and contacted the lending institution directly. She told me the process would take several weeks, but that the documentation I had brought was strong. I walked out of that bank feeling something unfamiliar. Not relief yet, but the specific solid feeling of having done exactly the right thing. Caleb sent the legal letter to my parents on a Tuesday. Certified mail, signature required. He told me it would arrive by Thursday. Thursday afternoon, my mother called my phone 4 times in a row. I watched each call come in and let everyone go to voicemail. Then my father called twice. Voicemail, then my mother again. I sat on my couch with my phone face up on the cushion beside me and watched the notifications stack up without touching a single one. Caleb had prepared me for this. He said the calls would come fast and emotional, and that engaging with any of it before we were ready would only give them material to work with. I didn't engage. By Friday, my father had shifted tactics. He called from a different number, probably assumed I was screening his regular one, which I was. I picked it up without thinking. His voice was measured, controlled, nothing like the prepared confidence from Sunday dinner. He said the loan situation was a misunderstanding, said he had intended to tell me, said he had planned to pay it off before it affected anything. Said the word misunderstanding 4 times in about 90 seconds. I counted. I let him finish completely. Then I said, "Dad, anything you need to say, please say it to Caleb." He started to respond. I said it again, same tone, same words. Then I ended the call and blocked that number too. My parents moved to the extended family within days. I know because my aunt in Portland called me, not to pressure me, thankfully, but to warn me. She said my parents had contacted her saying I had turned on them, that Caleb had manipulated me, that the whole situation was being blown out of proportion by people who didn't understand family dynamics. My aunt had listened politely. Then she called me. I told her everything. Sent her the credit report. Sent her the loan documentation. Told her about the pattern of borrowing across the family. She went quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Luna, they borrowed $4,000 from me 2 years ago. I never saw a cent back." 2 weeks after the first letter, Caleb sent a second one. This one was shorter, cleaner. It outlined 2 options clearly. Option 1, my parents formally acknowledge the fraudulent loan, cooperate fully with the bank investigation, and commit to a documented repayment plan for all outstanding family debts. Option 2, Caleb proceeds with filing a formal identity theft complaint with the Seattle Police Department and supports any family members who wish to pursue their own civil claims. He gave them 7 days to respond in writing through proper legal channels. No phone calls, no Sunday dinners, no conversations designed to activate guilt. Just 2 options, one deadline, and the quiet certainty of someone who already knew which way it was going. The 7 days that followed were the quietest stretch I had experienced in months. No calls that got through, no surprise visits, no messages rooted through cousins or aunts trying to soften me, just quiet. I went to work. I came home, cooked dinner, called Caleb each evening for a brief update. Nothing yet, he'd say. I slept better than I expected to. People always assume that going up against your own parents must feel devastating every single moment. But there is something clarifying about finally responding to the truth of a situation instead of the version of it you were handed. I wasn't fighting my parents. I was just, finally, refusing to disappear for their convenience. On day 5 of the 7-day deadline, my parents contacted a local family mediator. Sent Caleb an email suggesting that a neutral third party could help resolve everything without things going further. Caleb read it to me over the phone. I asked what he thought. He said it was a delay tactic, a way to buy time, soften the pressure, and reframe the situation as a family misunderstanding rather than what it actually was. He responded professionally. Told them mediation was appropriate for disputes. Identity theft and financial fraud were not disputes, they were documented violations. Mediation was not on the table. He reminded them the deadline was in 48 hours. They didn't respond that day. The call from my bank came on a Wednesday afternoon. The fraud specialist I had worked with asked if I had a few minutes. I stepped outside my office and stood in the cold Seattle air and listened. The investigation had concluded. The lending institution had been contacted and had cooperated fully. The loan application had been reviewed against my verified identity records. The bank's conclusion was formal and unambiguous. The account had been opened fraudulently using my personal information without my knowledge or consent. The account was being removed from my credit record completely. My credit score would be restored within 30 days. I stood outside in that cold air for a long moment after she finished, breathing. Just breathing. Caleb had been quietly building something on the family side while the bank investigation ran. He had spoken individually with our aunt in Portland, our cousin Reese, our uncle outside Spokane, and 3 other relatives my parents had borrowed from over the years. He hadn't pressured anyone. Just share the documentation and let people make their own decisions. By the time the bank investigation closed, 6 family members had confirmed they were owed money, amounts ranging from $800 to over $5,000. When the fraudulent loan in my name surfaced officially, Caleb shared that finding with everyone. The family group chat, which had been quiet for weeks, lit up completely. My parents had nowhere left to redirect the story. With the bank's formal finding in hand, Caleb filed the identity theft complaint with the Seattle Police Department. He also issued a formal civil demand on my behalf, covering the fraudulent loan amount, the documented credit damage, and associated legal costs. Separately, two of the family members Caleb had spoken with decided to pursue their own civil claims for the money they were owed. My parents received 3 separate legal documents within the same week. From me, from our aunt, from our uncle, all formal, all documented. All completely separate from the emotions of Sunday dinners and childhood invoices and rehearsed speeches about gratitude. My father called Caleb directly that evening. Caleb let it go to voicemail. Professionally, I spent the following weeks rebuilding every part of my financial life that had been touched. New bank accounts, new passwords across every financial platform, a credit monitoring service set up with alerts for any new account activity in my name. I went through every document I owned, social security card, passport, tax records, and secured everything properly for the first time. I also sat down and calculated exactly how much I had sent my parents over the previous 8 months, added it up for the first time. The number was higher than I had let myself realize. I wrote it down, not out of bitterness, just because looking at the actual number clearly was part of seeing the whole truth clearly. About 3 weeks after everything had been filed and the legal process was underway, Caleb came over for dinner, just the two of us. I cooked nothing fancy, pasta and garlic bread and the kind of easy comfort food that fits a quiet evening. We sat at my small kitchen table and talked for a long time, not about the case, not about our parents, about everything else. His work, my job, a trip he was thinking about taking, a book I had been reading. At some point I looked at him across that table and said, "You walked in that door at exactly the right moment." He smiled and said, "You would have figured it out." I'm not sure that's true, but it was kind. It has been 2 months since that Sunday dinner. The legal process is still moving, these things take time and Caleb has been clear about that. My credit is restored. My accounts are secure. My name is mine again. I think about that moment when my hand was moving toward that pen. How close I came to signing something built entirely on a guilt that had been carefully constructed my whole life. I was never in debt to my parents for being born, for being fed and clothed and raised. That was never a transaction, that was supposed to be love. And the difference between those two things is everything. I know that now in a way I can never know, and I am so glad I do.